All right, Fezzy, this is kind of exciting. There is an album out right now called Never Been Gone, done by Carly Simon. And what Carly Simon does on this album is take some of her most famous songs and reimagines them, plays them in a whole new place. Stuff like You're So Vain, You Belong to Me, That's the Way I Always Heard It Should Be, and Let the River Run. All these songs that you've known as hits, she's kind of doing them in a different way. Brand new album. It's called Never Been Gone. It's available in stores and Amazon.com, or you can go to CarlySimon.com. Let's bring her in right now, Miss Carly Simon. That was the only song, I believe, ever to win a Grammy and an Academy Award. And the singer, songwriter is here, Carly Simon. How are you, Carly?
And an Oscar.
Oh, it won the Oscar.
Yes.
Academy Award and Grammy, same year. It's fantastic to see you in here today. And it's really, really interesting to see that you've taken these songs that people have loved for so long and decided to kind of play with them a little bit.
I wanted to revisit them. I wanted to go back and see what I was feeling when I wrote them, to see how I feel about them now, to see how the emotions have changed, to see what my son Ben, who is largely the producer of this album, was interested in getting out of me as a performance on these songs and changing the arrangements. We wanted to do them all acoustically. They ended up being just about all acoustic with the exception of two that are right in the heart of the center of the record, because the record sort of goes like a curve. It starts out...
You know what's interesting, because I'm not a musician, so I probably focus on lyrics so much, and it's really interesting to see the way, like, you think about a song, the way you imagine a song change as the arrangements change. It was a stunning thing to go, oh, that song kind of means something a little different now as you change the arrangements.
That's right. That's right. Did you hear anything that struck you particularly?
Well, there was, I think, of course, when because you take a song like You're So Vain, and you sung it so many times and you heard it so many times. And this time, after hearing it, I was able to figure out that you were singing about Alan Seuss from Laughing after all these years, and I thought it was someone else.
Well, we have an opening to the reality section of your hippocampus.
Everything changes a little bit. But you have you've done this now, and you did it with Ben, and John Forte, I guess, was also producing and working on it.
John Forte produced one of the tracks, which is You Belong to Me. Or I should say, he co-produced it with Ben. John, I went into John's studio with him, into his environment, and cut it, and then and Ben was away at the time, and Ben came back, and he was so jealous that that he wanted to be incorporated into the mix. He wanted to be a producer.
What a great thing to be able to work with your kids now too, huh? Isn't that
it's so really great? It's just wonderful, and I work with both of them. And
you know, a couple of years ago, when I was working up at WNEW, Sally came in when she did Apartment 6S.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was really great night of just hanging out with her and listening to some of the stuff. She's so talented,
incredibly talented. I mean, my kids are it's a blessing, you know. You want your kids to be more talented than you are, and they want to be more talented than you are.
They're always looking to take it up just one notch.
They need to, yeah.
And it's the way life should work, right? I mean, that's the whole thing.
You have to hand them the torch.
Yeah. And I guess it can't be easy for either one of them coming into a family that there's so many great musicians and songwriters on both sides of their family.
Well, that's definitely true, and you can't even count them on two hands. They're and I must say, I mean, my eldest sister was an opera singer, so I grew up listening to opera and classical music for so many years, and then my other sister Lucy and I became folk singers, and we toured the folk, the coffee clubs in the 60s and college campuses, and Meanwhile, my uncles were jazz musicians and started jazz magazines, started Downbeat and Metronome, and my father was a classical pianist, and so you have, there was everyone surrounding us on my side, on the Simon side, and then on the Taylor side, you have James. Mm-hmm. Obviously, James Taylor is so incredibly brilliant and wonderful, and very emotionally accessible in his songs.
Yeah.
And then you have Livingston, who actually wrote the title track of my Christmas album, which is called Christmas is Almost Here. And it's just a beautiful album that I did about 4 years ago in the Peninsula Hotel in 4 days with Don Was.
It's just a real quick one.
Yeah, and then Don left on the 5th day to my own devices.
It's so strange, too. I mean, obviously, you're a great singer, but the songwriting comes down to it. And then early on in your career, you knew so many great songwriters and were working with them, and it was just like a magical time. You were living at Woodstock for a little while, too, I guess, before, or just hanging out there?
I visited there a couple of times. I ended up thinking that it was a deep, dark, black hole that you could sink into.
Oh, is that right?
Not very happily, yeah.
Just as the 60s started to twist over a little bit?
I just, one time I was in Woodstock and I was staying at a motel and I was wearing clogs, and there was in the motel there was a little stream outside, and you had to step on each rock to get over to the other side of the stream, and I fell and I broke my ankle. That was one time in Woodstock, and the other time I just had an incredibly dramatic experience with the drummer that I was playing with, and there was fights and throwing cognac bottles at limousines and fog and not being able to, there were car chases. So no, I can't say that I hung out at Woodstock.
Who are the songwriters that affected you, though, when you were a young songwriter? People that you were saying, okay, I can see that there's something happening here that I want to jump into.
Gosh, it depends upon what age you're talking about, because when I was, the first music that I heard was show tunes. Mm-hmm. And so I fell in love with the scores and the music to Kiss Me Kate and South Pacific and Carousel and Showboat and a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein, a lot of Rodgers and Hart, a lot of Frank Lesser, Guys and Dolls. I mean, those were my. I didn't think I was going to be a songwriter. Those were that was the music I appreciated. And then when I got a little bit older, in the 50s, just listening to like Little Anthony and the Everly Brothers and the Rock Around the Clock. And then when I got a little bit older, I listened to Pete Seeger and the Weavers and Harry Belafonte, and they were my heroes. I still didn't connect to myself as that I was going to be a singer and a songwriter, but those were the people that I appreciated. And then it wasn't really until I was in college and took an Italian class and had to memorize an Italian poem. And I couldn't do it without having some melody and some rhythm to it, because I needed melody and rhythm in order to be able to remember it. And somehow I understood that there was connection in my brain.
And it was almost like a subconscious connection. Like you weren't setting out to do that. As you started to memorize this, the melody just kind of came up a little bit.
Yes, and then I realized how melodies were so easy for me to get. I mean, not necessarily good melodies, but I'm just talking about melodies. I have a faucet in my brain, and it's on all the time. And at any given time, I can give you a melody that's coming out of the faucet. And as I say, it's not always good, but it's always there. It drips, 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 drips. And when I compose, I usually compose the lyrics first, and then I consult the faucet.
That is so interesting. So you're not taking a lot of credit for I'm sitting at the piano. I guess lyrically you'll find the lyrics and then just wait for that right melody to connect with it.
Yeah, and I certainly have the piano and the guitar to go and give me a little bit of direction in the melody. For instance, if I'm thinking of I'll make sense of it when I go to the piano, and I'll put it into a better shape.
Is that something that you just spend a little time with every day, or do you sit down and go, it's writing time now I'm going to write?
I don't have time every day, unfortunately. I'm involved in a lot of other things. Primarily running my household, which is a tremendous responsibility. It's a huge task, because I am a Cancerian and I love my house more than I love anything. And some people have said that it is my greatest work. That's about it. So I have to keep it up and running. And I'm the only one that worries really about the plumbing. So I got to do the plumbing and the painting and I mean, I don't necessarily do it myself, but I have to make sure that it's all done. And it's a huge task. And I've got animals and a farm, and so it's... Every
once in a while, the rest of us are lucky to get some of these songs. When the animals and the farm and everything are taken care of.
Well, I sort of wish that the animals and the farm could take care of themselves, and I could sit and write for 3 or 4 hours a day, but that doesn't often happen. It happens when I have an album of songs that I have to write, or I'm working on an album. Then, of course, I'm focused.
You go back over some of this stuff while I was looking through your liner notes, and some of these songs might just stay pieces for quite some time before you bring them out again.
That's right. Yeah, I write and I get an idea and I put it down on paper, and I don't necessarily have any connection to rhythm or melody yet, but I have an idea. Mm-hmm. For instance, in You're So Vain, I put down You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song Is About You in a notebook. But that was all I had. I thought, wow, that's interesting, that's deep. And so then I was at a party and somebody walked in with a scarf and looked at himself in the mirror. And I wrote that down. I wrote, you walked into the party like you were walking onto a yacht. And I had that in my notebook, but I didn't connect that to You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song Is About You. And in the meantime, I had a whole song that I'd written using the melody of You're So Vain called Bless You, Ben. And Ben was not alive. My son Ben was not alive at that point. It was about 8 years before Ben, or 7 years before Ben. But the lyric was, it went, bless you, Ben, you came in where nobody else left off. There I was all by myself, hiding up in my loft, talking trouble, took my time, and singing some sad songs. I had some dreams, there were clouds in my coffee. So I wrote that down. And out of that, I extracted, I had some dreams, there were clouds in my coffee, because I thought that was the only good line in it. And so, but I still had not connected all the things together. And when I did, when I was in a writing mode, when I had an album to produce of my own songs, I looked at those three things and I thought, wait a minute, that man that walked into the party probably thinks that the song that I'm about to write is about him. And that's how, that's how that happened. And then I had some dreams, there were clouds in my coffee, just seemed to kind of fit into the whole rest of the song, into the rest of the meaning.
It comes together so cinematic by the time we get to hear it. It seems like, for you it's bits and pieces here, but when we hear it as the audience, it's just this one flow that seems like it all happens in real time. It is
cinematic, and oddly enough, there's never been a video of that song.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
As the pre-video days. And yet, what else is really something is how often movies will use your songs, particularly romantic comedies. There just seems to be something about your songs that fit with cinema.
Well, that was a wonderful piece of luck that I had to be. It was actually, I was friendly with the directors of the movies that you're probably thinking of. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me because we were probably having lunch together at a diner.
Right.
I don't quite remember, but certainly it was Working Girl and it was Heartburn, and